Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dr. Tahmina Zebin. I'm a senior lecturer in computing science and AI in Brunel University of London. And I'm joined today by my colleague Jinian Wu. We are part of the RADIANT-CERSI, which is a Center of Excellence for Regulatory Science Innovation. And we are focusing mostly on AI on healthcare. So today's session, we designed it specifically for healthcare innovators, and this is a research-informed activity, meaning that the things that you see on the slides or the tools, worksheets that you see today are grounded in systematic review, comparison of global AI risk assessment frameworks, and they are adapted carefully to UK regulatory and NHS context. So the things that you see are not compliance checklist, but it's about helping you think clearly, proportionately, and practically about the risk across AI lifecycle development. So before moving into the main content, I would like to hand over to my colleague Jinian to do some housekeeping bits.
Yeah, so thank you again for coming to our workshop. So before our workshop, there are just two reminders. The first one is a pre-workshop survey. So if you haven't completed yet, please scan the QR code and complete it. Another thing is a consent form, so please complete it and return it to us. You can find it in the invitation email. Also, this session will be recorded and shared in RADIANT-CERSI website because we want more people can watch it in the future.
Okay,
Yeah.
and because it's a funded research organization, the form filling is part of the process of the ethics approval and for publication purposes. So hopefully you can bear with us with the form filling bits.
Yeah, thank you so
Okay,
much.
okay, so we got registration from about 15 or 16 participants, and in terms of AI lifecycle development, it did an initial analysis. Most of the people that registered have a concept or early research stage of their development. About 4 participants are doing prototyping, pilot testing. 3 organizations are at their clinical validation and evidence generation stage. So we curated the slides to capture audiences from all aspects of this. So if we can summarize what we are going to cover today. So here's how we structured the session. So we'll start by clarifying what AI risk actually means for healthcare innovators and why it matters beyond the technical performances. So we'll talk a little bit about intended use and risk classification in this case. Then we move on to the regulatory standards or UK regulatory ecosystem, where we are at in terms of the AI regulation. There are some international standards that we will also touch on for coordination purposes. Then we move on to our core section on the risk assessment frameworks available worldwide and how we curated some innovator guide and worksheets for framework application that could be applied to your specific product or AI systems. Then Jinian would cover part of the risk assessment frameworks and we'll summarize by discussing what sort of tools we are developing as part of RADIANT-CERSI. You definitely have noticed this webinar is 2 parts, so we do have a workshop too. So Jinian would also share what we are going to do in the workshop 2 sections. Okay? So to set the scene, it's useful to clarify that what we mean by risk and risk management in the context of healthcare AI. Risk is not just about whether something is going wrong. It combines how likely that that event can occur and how severe the consequences would be if, let's say, something went wrong. And in AI system, risk can arise from a number of things, including data, models, system design, and where you deployed it. Risk also depends on your deployment context and how that specific system is actually being used in practice, whether things are being misused, whether people are over relying on the tools, whether there are automation bias and that sort of thing. So AI risk management is about minimizing these potential negative impacts of the AI system while maximizing their positive benefits. So the management stages would involve risk identification early and then putting controls in place to reduce them. So you would evaluate what sort of harm this can cause, and then you could mitigate and monitor over time. And once you have controls applied, you if your context or if there is a significant change your AI system goes through, then you need to update the control based on the changes that your system has experienced. So in the healthcare context, risk is always associated with the intended use of your system. And when regulators look at your AI system, they do not start by asking, let's say, how accurate your model is. They start by asking, what is the system intending to do in the clinical practice? So that intended use determines whether your system is a lower risk medical device or a higher risk medical device. The same model can be low risk in one setting and maybe higher risk in another. So let's look at an example of an ambient voice transcribe that we can use in this case, because in NHS setting or in the GP setting, people are using that for transcription purposes, and it's often misclassified. An example that's misclassified. So let's say if your system intended use of the system is pure transcription, no structuring is happening on the data captured, or there is no inference. According to the MHRA intended use and significant change guidance, and there is an IEC standard for identifying the intended use that suggests that in UK context, it's not a medical device if it is only capturing the data. And if it is not a medical device, then MHRA is not regulating it. But if you want to deploy it in the NHS setting, you still need to go to the TAC, which is the a technology assessment criteria for digital technology assessment criteria standard for NHS. And you also have to do the data protection impact assessment, because the data and operational risk are still there. But if you are wording your intended use to say, okay, that though I'm doing pure transcription, but my system is improving accuracy of capture or reducing errors, it may be considered as a borderline software as a medical device in the UK. So for ambient voice transcription, if you're doing anything more than transcription, so let's say if you are structuring that clinical information, then medical device regulation 2002's rule 11 applies, and then you then fall into a higher risk category for intended use. So if your intended use is transcription, clinical information, or output used for documentation, though let's say the clinician is still approving what's being submitted, the risk level in this case is moderate. And if you're on a class 2 medical device, then MHRA is your regulator, but you need to get conformity assessment done by any of the approved bodies in the UK. Now, if your system does inferencing along with structuring, then the risk category increases more. And the thing to notice it with the intended use is the evidence base that you need to submit for your conformity assessment would be more if your risk classification is higher in this case. So chapter 2 classification section in MHRA, you can also get more clear instruction on how to classify your devices. Okay, so let's quickly move on to the regulatory standards that governs the landscape of the UK device regulation. So MHRA is the statutory regulator for medical devices in the UK, including software as a medical device and AI as a medical device. And MHRA is responsible for device classification. Any sort of market authorization would be provided, or EKCS authorization would be provided by MHRA. And the performance requirements or post-market surveillance, vigilance, oversight of all the approved bodies that give you conformity for your device regulation would also be overseen by the MHRA. So there are other bodies that ensures the standard and the quality of the evidences that you include when you are going through the regulation. So NICE provides the evidence standard frameworks to support adoption and commissioning decisions rather than market authorization. So NHS DTAC is a mandatory assurance framework for NHS procurement. So let's say you developed an AI system, you want NHS to procure it. So NHS DTAC criteria you definitely need to submit along with your, let's say, procurement files and so on. ICO regulates the data protection and privacy compliance under the GDPR, and the clinical safety officers operate within organizations under mandatory NHS standards for, let's say, DCB 0129 and 016 to manage clinical risk and safety cases. So they want to ensure whatever they are procuring are safe enough to be used in those specific settings. So underpinning all this, the international standards such as ISO 14971, ISO 13485, and the IEC 62304, these are not regulators themselves, but they are widely used to demonstrate that the evidences that you are creating are complying to the regulations needed. Most of the system developers, they usually do not stay in the UK. Only people want to expand their products to other markets and I think most of you know, not every country is at the same stage of regulatory stage. So UK is currently in the implementation stage, and there would be statutory instruments coming up next year, I think mid of next year. So currently the active regulation for software as a medical device regulation is following MDR 2002. There are changes into post-market surveillance already that came end of last year, and they are planning to change pre-market requirements as well. So MHRA has an AI as an MD roadmap. There are early assurance pilot going through AI airlock and accelerated pathways for physical devices. There are NHS AI labs, and there is funding for 7 CERSIs, and there is a recent launch of AI Commission that is shaping up the UK regulation at this stage. So it's changing, and upcoming changes are coming very soon. In EU in 2024, the legislation was finalized, and conformity rules for high-risk AI is already there. Though I think there is a current discussion with the high-tech providers on the rules being applied on the AI system. So there could be some sort of leeway for other things, but it's kind of more strict than UK at the moment. So US's FDA and UK's MHRA and Health Canada has recently collaborated to produce some AI-enabled medical device, good machine learning practice principles that are applicable to AI system developers. Canada has regulatory sandbox. They have Health Canada AI guidance and pilot PMS program. Singapore, Japan follows IMDRF members are aligning to international standards that are kind of more mature in terms of regulations as well. So this slide kind of summarizes the relevant international standards for AI as a medical device. So these are accepted benchmarks for safety, quality, and governance. And these evidence frameworks usually support regulatory decisions. So for AI risk management, there are specific standards and frameworks. You would see that wherever they are trying to use their products in, you would see that the people are complying to the international standards to produce or document their evidences for specific governance aspects. Okay. Any questions so far? It's kind of too much, but it's a complex ecosystem. Some elements are mandatory elements, and the standards and frameworks are there to support you produce evidences that would comply with the regulation. Okay. So let's move on to the risk assessment frameworks and what we did as RADIANT-CERSI to help AI innovators, let's say, generate their evidences for regulatory compliance for AI systems. So if I begin with why you should use a risk assessment framework, so regulations tell us what to do, that your system should be safe, things should be evaluated properly, a system should be robust, not biased, there should be safety controls and so on. So frameworks help you plan how to do it. So you can improve the safety and trustworthiness of a product, and frameworks can assist you identify, evaluate, and mitigate potential risks more systematically and effectively. And it also provides you living processes for post-market surveillance, drift, and bias monitoring. And it also helps you translate regulatory expectations into technical steps. So frameworks also guide you structure evidence for ISO risk filing or DCB safety cases, the tax submission or technical files overall. And you would see that the different systems may ask for the same sort of evidences by using different terminologies. So frameworks sometimes help you reduce duplication by aligning multiple requirements by multiple bodies that you may need to comply in terms of regulation. Okay. So our team of researchers did an umbrella review of the global risk and governance frameworks available in the recent years. And we looked into 28 frameworks at the beginning, and then we shortlisted 5 for today's session. And we created some innovator guide and worksheets to share with you today. And the shortlisting criteria. So we said there is plenty of frameworks available. So we shortlisted some of the frameworks. Those are recognized and referenced by the regulators themselves, public bodies, or standards organization. None of the frameworks that we chose today are speculative or purely academic. So each aligns with UK expectations around safety, data protection, accountability, and evidence. And they have practical usability for innovators. So the risk assessment frameworks that we are sharing with you today would start with NIST AI risk management framework. It is more of a, let's say, complete framework that we identified among the frameworks that we researched so far. So it's a life cycle based frameworks covering governance, risk mapping, measurement, and ongoing management. Then we would be sharing bits and pieces from Fraunhofer AI assessment catalog. It's coming from Germany, and it's kind of more complete in terms of how you technically test and evaluate your AI system in terms of robustness, performance, bias, explainability, and security. We will cover ICO, AI, and data protection risk toolkit. It's coming from the UK. So this toolbox has, let's say, direct mapping on data protection impact assessment that you can do on your system and so on. So we'd also cover you little bits and pieces of EU, ALTAI, and the Ada Lovelace Institute's AI assurance tool. And what our researcher team has done, as you can see, the frameworks are coming from, let's say, UK, US, and other parts of the world. We tried to get all the good practice elements and mapped it to the UK regulatory space, how some elements from this framework could help you in producing evidence in the UK context. Okay, so the first framework that I'm going to share is the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, and it's one of the backbone frameworks that we are going to share with you in webinar workshop 2 as well. So it was developed in 2029 by the US National Institute Standards and Technology, and its purpose is to improve the trustworthiness, risk management, and accountability of the AI systems. It has 4 different core functions that they subdivided the framework into. So there's some govern functionalities for governance, accountability, and documentation. And map function deals with, let's say, understanding where AI is operating. So it understands the context, identifies the risks, who the stakeholders will be. And measure function deals with documenting your process or evaluation of model risks technically. And manage function helps you implement, let's say, controls to mitigate the risks. So you monitor your risk, respond to changes, adapt over time, and that sort of things. Okay, so if I can stop sharing this bit. So we created, for each framework, we created an innovator guide. And the way we formulated the innovator guide is it's a 147-page document. We summarized it into a 5-page innovator guide for innovators in the UK. So if I can quickly stop sharing and quickly go to one of the worksheets that we designed. And if it allows me to find it quickly now. Okay. So in the innovator guide, I told that we curated a 147-page document into a 5-page innovator guide where we tried to map that, okay, there is a function that an IST framework is suggesting about policies and procedure and what the innovator should do in that specific context. So let's say the governance function is helping you establishing risk management foundation. So there are some guidances on policies and procedure, and we translated it into what innovators should do. So you're saying that, okay, as an innovator, you should write a simple AI governance policy that defines how you collect data, train model, handle updates, run safety reviews, operate human oversight, and so on. So once you apply this element of the functionality, do what as an innovator you should do. You create an AI governance policy for your system. You create your versioning rules, version control criteria, data governance notes, and so on. And once you have these probably embedded in your design process, it prevents rework later, gives you clarity in terms of investor, regulator, NHS, and if you need to produce evidences to NHS buyers, then you have things in place that you can probably modify according to the criteria by various, let's say, buyers or the people that you're trying to deploy your system to. So similarly, if you're an early stage innovator, the map functionality is dealing with understanding the context or identifying your risks. So let's say in the document they talk about context establishment. So we translated it to what as an innovator you should do. And in this case, you also have things that we mapped in terms of, okay, what part of regulation you're covering by defining your intended purpose or you defining your target users. So by documenting this, you are filling in some of the portions of your evidence base on, let's say, MHRA would like to know what your intended purpose is. For a DTAC or your quality management system also would need to know about these aspects of the things. Okay, so we created an innovator guide for you that covers the elements that an ISD framework suggested, and we translated it into the UK context, and we kind of summarized map it by mapping NIST to UK. And if you want to move into EU and global other regulatory platform, we also summarized, let's say, what functionalities from the NIST framework you could use to comply with which element of the UK relevant, let's say, specifications. Okay, so we created an innovator guide. As we told initially, this session has a workshop too. So depending on your life cycle stage as an innovator, we created a set of worksheets. So if I can move on to the worksheet element of it. So we generated some prompt and we created a worksheet where you, for your specific product, can log in the, let's say, intended purpose of your system or user settings and care settings for your specific user. And as we are developing these worksheets, what we want from you is to give us input on, for your specific product, which sections of it helped you probably think clearly, or if you have a product already in market, are these questions useful in terms of your technical file submission, evidences that you introduce in your conformity assessment, and so on. So I think Jinian would talk about it at the end of the session anyways, so I'd probably stop sharing and Jinian can share with you the few other frameworks that we created similar sort of documentation for the innovators in the healthcare AI space. Over to Jinian. And
Okay.
if there is any questions in the chat, I could probably have a look at them. Okay.
So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, it's like a full screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Right. Okay, so let me bigger. Okay. So thank you, Tahmina. Now I'll take you through the other 4 frameworks we selected. I'll start with the Fraunhofer AI Assessment Catalog. This one is a very comprehensive framework. So it provides developers with a guideline for systematically making their AI applications trustworthy by setting out a 4-step approach. So the 4-step approach is the first to conduct a comprehensive risk analysis with regards to the 6 dimensions. I will give more details about these 6 dimensions in next slides. And then to establish objectives that are preferably measurable to make sure to ensure the mitigation of the risk identified in the first step is demonstrable. Also, it systematically lists measures along the life cycle of AI application to achieve the objectives defined before. And finally, it creates a stringent augmentation that the objectives formulated in the second step has been achieved. Also, it takes into account AI-specific trade-offs, for example, security and transparency. Okay, so to better help the innovators, this catalog, it provides 3 guidelines. So the first one is a guideline for the structured identification of AI-specific risks with regard to the 6 dimensions of trustworthiness. So the 6 dimensions are fairness, autonomy and control, transparency, reliability, safety and security, and data protection. And the second guideline is about the assessment criteria. So this guideline can be used to formulate specific assessment criteria for your AI application. So for example, at least establish KPIs that can be used to quantify relevant objectives where possible. The last one is a guideline for structured documentation of technical or organizational measures along the life cycle of your AI application. So it can reflect the current state and can be implemented into mitigate the potential risks. Okay. So this AI assessment catalog, it provides a very comprehensive workflow. So it consists of 2 parts. The first one is top-down, and another one is bottom-up. These 2 diagrams are from the documents provided by this organization. It looks a little bit, contains a lot of detail, so we make a simplified version. So the top-down part of this catalog of this workflow. It's more like it's more like to create the criteria for your AI application. So the assessments start with from the dimension level, and you need to conduct a protection requirement analysis to and this protection requirement is determined based on the potential damage that could be caused. So if the protection requirement is medium or high, then you can go to the risk area under each dimension. So the purpose of the risk analysis you can see here is to determine which of the potential risks in the risk area are relevant to your AI application and must be controlled. So you do this risk analysis, then define the and find the potential risks relevant, and then you can define the objectives for this relevant risks. Okay, so yeah, so with these objectives, you can further get the specific criteria for your AI application. Okay, so oh, yeah. So after the top-down part of this workflow, we can move to the bottom-up parts. So it start with so after you have your criteria, you should take measures to ensure this criteria has been met. So the AI assessment catalog, it provides guidance for documenting measures in a structured way along the life cycle of your AI application. It offers very different approaches to mitigating the risks. So from the data, AI components, embedding, and operation. So you can find more details in their documents and our guidance. And after that, you do an overall assessment across different criteria under each risk area to ensure that it's already safeguarded. And then you can move up to the summary of the dimension. So it's like you are make sure under this dimension is already safe enough. And after you get all the dimensions safeguarded, you can do a cross dimensional assessment and to reach the conclusion that your AI application is trustworthy. Okay, so that's from her floor, and now I want to talk about the ICO AI and data protection risk toolkits. So this toolkit is designed to provide further practical support to your organization to reduce the risk to the individual rights and freedoms caused by the AI system. So this toolkit can complement the Data Protection Impact Assessment, DPIA, but not to replace them. In ICO, so the first question is who is the toolkit for? And in the ICO webinar, they suggest that this toolkit is primarily for the three groups, the risk and the governance team, model development team, and the senior leadership. This toolkit can also divided by the life cycle stages and the risk area. So it covers 4 life cycle stages: business requirement and design, data acquisition and preparation, training and testing, and development and monitoring. It depends. So for the life cycle stages, it really depends on your progress. So for example, you may not have deployed your AI system, so the deploying and the monitoring life cycle may not be applicable. Also, it covers different risk areas with a GDPR reference, so you can select the area that are more relevant to your AI application. Here is the structure of the main structure of this toolkit, and it's also about how to use this toolkit more effectively. So you can see it starts with a risk identification, then you assess your risk, control your risk, and you reassess your risk after the control. So this diagram can give you a a better visualization of the structure of this toolkit. So in the beginning, you start with a risk identification. The toolkits it give you at least different risk data protection risk statements, and they're from different life cycle stages or risk area. You can pick those are more relevant to your AI application. Then you need to assess your risks. It's like you need to give a risk assessment summary, and you need also rate your risk. So it can be low to high or non-applicable. So you need to do this part by yourself. And after the assessment, the toolkit it give you a control guidance. So for each control, it will let you know the control objective, and more importantly, is the practical steps to reduce the risk. So the practical steps is like in 3 level. The first one is like you must do. It's like legal requirements. The second one is you should do. It's like the best practice given by the toolkit. And the third one is you could do. It's like optional good practice. It also gives you some further ISO guidance for your reference. And with this guidance, you can implement the control by yourself. So you need to take down what you have done. You need to take down some information like practical steps your organization will take, the owner of the control and current status, also when you complete it. And after the risk control, you can reassess your AI. You can reassess your AI application, and it's called residual risk rating. So it's like give you an evaluation after you taking the action of the control. Okay, so the third one is assessment list for trustworthy AI, which is from EU, and this one is. This one is a self-assessment tool based on the 7 key requirements of trustworthy AI. And here is the 7 requirements, like human agency and oversight to accountability. And the diagram on the right is like a structure, the main structure of this assessment list. So as I said, it covers 7 requirements, and under each requirement, it has different subsection. And for each subsection, it has different assessing questions. So you can evaluate your AI application by answering these assess questions, which are relevant to your AI product. The assessment list, I mean, the developer of this framework is suggest it's better to involve a multidisciplinary team of people. For example, the stakeholders can be designer and developers of the AI system, data scientists, and also other officers or specialists to the management. The last one we want to introduce is Ada Lovelace algorithm impact assessment. So this framework is also based in the UK. So this institute, Ada Lovelace, they propose the use of AIA for data access in healthcare context. So they have a case study for the UK NHS proposed national medical imaging platform, but it can also be adaptable to other domain in other use case. So they propose this 7-stage process for the AIA. The first step is AIA reflexive exercise. So you need to complete a template to better identify the possible harms and the impacts arising from your project, also the affected stakeholders and some ethical consideration, which are very common to AI in healthcare. After that, you will submit this AIA template to this data access committee. This is as a part of the application initial filtering process. So if you meet their requirements, you can move to the third step. It's like a workshop. The NHS AI Labs coordinates. They coordinates a workshop on the applicant projects, so you can you can receive different feedbacks from different stakeholders. And then and after this workshop, you can update. It's like you return to the AIA template and update it based on what you have heard and learned from the workshop. Okay, so after that, you can the committee, they can make a decision about whether to grant you the data access or not. The completed AIA will also be published in their website. And after the publication, the AIA should be revised on an ongoing basis by your team and at a certain trigger point, such as process of significant model redevelopment or changes. Okay, so you can find this diagram in the guidance. It's like to help you better visualize the steps or workflow of this framework. Okay.
Jinian, you're muted.
Oh, it's okay. Oh, can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. So here is another mapping we provide for you. So you can see it's like we map the different AI life cycle stages to the focus and the supporting frameworks components. I will just give a very quick example. So if you're in the early concept stage, and you can move to here, and you see now your focus is problem definition and initial regulatory awareness. Also, you can find some useful or helpful frameworks components. For example, in NIST, you can get some information from the govern and the map section. Also in ICO, you can get some data protection ideas by the design. Also, if you're in other different stages, you can get your different input from this mapping. Okay, so
You're muted again.
okay, yeah. So yeah, this slide will talk about what we have prepared for you. I think Tamina, she just gave a introduction of the guidance on the worksheet by the example of NIST. So we mainly have the three for you. So the first one is frameworks guidance. It's like a brief introduction of each framework. Also, we include some workflow structure or main features of each framework. And then it's like the framework worksheet, which you need to complete and use it as a supporting document for the workshop too. And then it's the example use cases, which can give you more practical or detailed ideas about how to apply in the framework in the real life project. Okay, so in the end, I want to take maybe 3 minutes to give you a very brief introduction to our workshop too. So the second workshop will be about the reflecting on the practical use of AI risk assessment frameworks. It will be in January 15. It's Thursday, also online and 1 hour. So in that workshop, you will share your experiences and the challenges in applying the frameworks. Also, you will suggest how the frameworks could be improved and support healthcare regulatory innovators. Also, you can connect with other healthcare innovators. So we strongly encourage you to come for our workshop too. And before that, here are something you can do to better prepare for that. So the first one is to practice applying the relevant framework to your project. And you can use our guidance for help. And I think we highly recommend you to complete our framework worksheet, and you can use it for the discussion in the workshop too. And please keep in mind when you are complete the framework worksheet, there's two key question is what are the advantages and limitation of the framework, and also how do you propose to improve them? And yeah, I think that's it. Tamina,
Okay,
do you want to add
so yeah,
anything?
just to add on the worksheets, so we will be sharing. So you have done a screening form. So based on your innovation stage, we would share some of the worksheets that's applicable to your stage of innovation. And because we are developing these worksheets, we want to make them available as a community resource later on. And we want to use this opportunity to get feedback from you or input from you, whether the frameworks are helping in either raising awareness for different stages, or if you're a more mature innovator, the prompts or the questions that this framework is asking you, whether that is, let's say, helping the regulatory journey or helping the documentation process of the regulatory journey in any way. So when you come, I think before webinar 2, we'd send to you the worksheets. If you can complete them and reflect on aspects of it to help us improve the worksheets later on. And when you come to workshop 2, we'll be discussing on various elements in a more structural way that we can report on a publication later on. So if you're willing to help us on workshop 2, I think we definitely need your consent and the participant information sheet back, because the things that we discuss would be published. So it's a part of the ethical way of doing research process. Uh, I hope you could help us produce the content better in workshop 2. Okay. Is there anything else, Gillian, you want to share?
I think that's it. And don't forget to complete the consent form and scan this QR code to complete the pre-workshop survey.
And if you have a preference to work on a specific frameworks, so let's say if you are more at a model development stage and you want to know the technical aspects of the regulatory requirement. So let's say if I'm suggesting, okay, help us fill Fraunhofer AI assessment worksheet, and that would allow you to explore all the relevant regulatory things that you need to think when you're developing your model. And then let us know based on your product, which sections were useful, not useful. There are some reflection questions we drafted in the document as well. So if you could return to us your specific product specific feedback, that would inform us as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, because some frameworks is more comprehensive, so I mean today we have time limitations. So if you have any question, you can write to me and I can try to give you more guidance on the framework. Yeah. Any questions?
Okay, if there are no other questions, we'll hopefully get in touch with you with the slides for the session and the worksheets.
Yeah, and other
And
resources.
in case you have preference on working on specific worksheets, please write back to us. We could provide you with the relevant worksheet. And at the end of the session, we'd make all the worksheets available. But for now, if you have preferences to work based on your life cycle stage, please let us know.